The Process Podcast, breaking down the daily habits, processes, and tools of high achievers. Now, here's your host, Brad Wilson.
Well, hello there. It's fancy meeting you here. This is Brad Wilson, the host of the Process Podcast. And if you haven't yet taken a moment to subscribe to the show, I would very much appreciate it. And if you happen to love this episode and want to shout it from the rooftops, please be my guest. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes or however it is that you're listening to our show. I would very much appreciate it, and you would have my eternal gratitude. On today's show, we have Jonathan Robinson. Jonathan was born into a wealthy family, but grew up feeling miserable. He learned from an early age that money wasn't a solution for more love and inner peace, and after being suicidal as a teenager, decided to search the world to expand his love and increase his inner peace. His journey led him amazingly to conversations with the Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa, Deepak Chopra, among many others. As an international best-selling author and regular on the Oprah Winfrey Show, as well as being seen in places like USA Today, ABC, CNN, and Newsweek, Jonathan has been seen and read by 250 million people around the world. I can't even wrap my mind around that number. In this interview, you'll learn how to get out of the blame game and communicate more effectively with more empathy. The magic mantra: Jonathan traveled 18,000 miles and spent thousands of dollars getting from a guru in India. You'll get it from the comfort of your own home, wherever you're listening to this podcast. How to increase the amount of love and peace in your life, and much more. So if you've ever wished that you could have a communication miracle with your spouse, significant other, coworkers, or boss, then this is the interview for you. Without any further ado, here's my conversation with Jonathan Robinson. Jonathan, good morning, my friend. Happy to have you on the show.
Good to be here.
So I read Communication Miracles for Couples, which very good, actionable material. And when I think about the word miracle, it's a strong word. It conjures up some very powerful visual images. So could you tell me the story of the first or an early communication miracle that you observed in a couple?
Well, I get to see a lot of couples generally on the verge of divorce because people generally wait about 6 years between having a problem in a relationship and actually seeing a counselor. If people did that with their physical health, they'd end up dead. A lot of times the people coming into my office, their relationship is pretty much dead. They've been arguing for years. And so for me, a miracle is when in the matter of 10 or 15 minutes, couples who can't look at each other, can't really talk to each other, end up back in love, holding hands and feeling connected. And people don't realize that there are methods that are so powerful in terms of communication that you can literally overcome years of animosity in a few minutes if you have the right method and the right guidance.
I was going to ask you about a specific time frame. 10 or 15 minutes is that, I think for people that have been fighting for many years, that is a miracle. What are parts of the methodology that lead to a communication miracle in 10 to 15 minutes?
Well, throughout your program, I'm going to talk about maybe 5 or 6 of the methods and give examples of that. In my latest book, which is called More Love, Less Conflict, I offer 40 methods. And the key is to find the method that really works for you. But there are some underlying principles that are probably true with any method that you use. One of them is that the best methods are really simple and really easy to use, because when you're stressed, people are not going to use a method that takes a long time or is complicated, or you won't be able to remember it. So a lot of my methods literally take 10 seconds to do. And that's, in a way, how the More Love, Less Conflict book is different than Communication Miracles for Couples. I think people nowadays are even more stressed and need even simpler methods than they did, a bunch of years ago. But one of the things that they all have in common is that blame never works. And that's what people normally do when they're stressed. They blame each other, and they expect really me to act as like a judge, deciding, this couple's, or this person's guilty, this person's not guilty. And that never works. Never once have I blamed my wife and told her everything she's doing wrong, where she then responded by saying, "Oh my gosh, I get it now. Thank you for showing me the errors of my ways. I will have to change." That doesn't happen. Right. But that's where people put their energy, and it's a complete waste of time. And people sometimes do that for decades. So a lot of the methods are really about taking responsibility. They're about creating more vulnerability, more trust, more gratitude, more honesty about what they really want. And the good news is most people don't know any of those methods, and they're still trying to have a relationship. It'd be like trying to fly an airplane, but you've had no lessons. So I think communication is one of those areas where you can learn stuff in an hour and literally double the amount of love that you have, because now even an hour of how to fly an airplane is better than none.
So starting from ground zero, an hour is big. And from what I've read about emotional intelligence and these sorts of things, we're born with emotions, but we don't ever spend time developing them or thinking about them or learning exactly how they work. I think that there's a cognitive bias, the Dunning-Kruger syndrome, where people greatly overestimate what they think they know, especially when they don't know very much. You kind of threw the gauntlet earlier, a 10-second method. Tell me about it. 10 seconds is a very short amount of time. I've been speaking for like 20 seconds already.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the methods are literally fill in the blank sentences, which can be very powerful. For example, one of them, I'll give the background to this. According to scientists who studied relationships and marriage, the number one correlation with a happy marriage is the amount of appreciations couples give to each other. So one of the methods is saying, "Something I notice about you that I appreciate is." Now, we've known each other for about 6 minutes, but there's already like 4 things I've noticed about you that I appreciate.
Tell me. Let me know.
So if exactly. Most people want to know that stuff.
Right.
So, something I noticed about you that I appreciate, Brad, is you're really hungry for personal growth stuff. This is not just something you do. You're really passionate about it. And we talked about how you have a morning routine and how you read my former book. You're really curious about this stuff. This isn't just a way to make money for you. So I appreciate that about you. You're not using canned questions. You're using your own curiosity. So little things that we appreciate, by saying them, that method doesn't take very long. In fact, sometimes I get caught up in my day, so I forget to appreciate my wife. So I have Siri on my iPhone remind me to tell her something I appreciate every day. Don't tell her this, by the way, because I wouldn't want to ruin it.
You're not going to have your wife listen to my podcast? I guess she hears you speak a lot. So
she's heard me speak a lot. Yeah.
Right. I think we take a lot for granted and don't, like you said, verbally communicate appreciation, gratitude. Yesterday, an example of gratitude. I try to find these things because, like you mentioned, in my morning routine, after I meditate, I stretch and I'm grateful. And yesterday, my wife and I were getting gas, and the pump was full. There were so many cars just everywhere. There were cars at each little thing. And so I had to wait in line to get gas. And the first thought is frustration, like, oh, this is annoying. I have to wait in line to get gas. And then I thought, I've gone to the pump 100 times in recent memory. Not once have I had to wait in line. And not once was I grateful that I didn't have to wait in line, right? So you notice the things you're grateful for that you kind of take for granted when they're not readily available. Can you speak to me about gratitude in relationships, things to be, grateful for that maybe you take for granted?
Well, a few years ago, a friend of mine came back from India saying that he'd learned a magical mantra from a guru that helped him to feel really grateful for his wife and kids. Well, in the 90s, I'd interviewed a lot of spiritual leaders, everybody from the Dalai Lama to the late Mother Teresa, asking them about their spiritual advice. And that book was called The Experience of God. And a lot of them, to my surprise, said that the most important thing you can do for your spirituality is to focus on gratitude. So I knew gratitude was important, but I'm kind of like a technique junkie. So I wanted to know what this magical mantra was to help people feel gratitude. So this guru had this magical mantra. I wanted it. So I actually traveled all the way to India to get it. Have you ever been to India?
I have not. Why didn't your friend just tell you the magical mantra? Why did you need to get it from the guru?
Well, he said that the only way I'd really appreciate it is if I got it from him directly, like it was a transmission of some kind. So, I traveled 18,000 miles to India. Now, your listeners are going to get this mantra without traveling to India.
Okay.
But there's something about traveling, booking a plane for a couple $1,000, traveling for 18 hours through the air. Once you arrive in India, taking a rickshaw for 3 hours to get to the ashram, then waiting in line 4 hours to talk to the guru. So that whatever he said, I was hungry.
Yeah, you're invested at that point.
Yeah. So after waiting, I have jet lag, I'm worn out. I finally talk to him. I say, Guruji, I hear you have this magical mantra. Help me feel gratitude for my wife and kids and not take them for granted. Would you please tell me what it is? So he says in a deep Indian accent, yes, my mantra is the most powerful mantra on earth. He says, normally I wait a couple of weeks to tell people this mantra, but you come all the way from America, I will tell you what it is. And he leans in to whisper into my ear, and he says, whenever possible, repeat the following words. The mantra I give you are the words, thank you. I look at him, I think he's joking. So I look at him, but he's not joking. I say, that's it? I traveled 18,000 miles to get thank you, that's it? So he looked at me and he said, no, that's it is the mantra you have been using. And that makes you feel like you never have enough. My mantra is thank you, not that's it. That's it will take you nowhere. So I'm like really pissed off. So I look at him, I in a snide way, I say, well, thank you. And he looks at me and he says, thank you is not the mantra. You must say it from your heart many times a day. So when you wake up in the morning and you see your partner, say thank you from your heart. And when you see your child or sunset or your pet, say thank you from your heart many times a day. And soon you will be filled with overwhelming gratitude. Well, I was still pissed off, but I figured I would do what he said. So
you kind of have to at this point.
Yeah, you travel so far. So, I step into the taxi to take me to my hotel, and I say, thank you for the air conditioning, because it's like 110 degrees in India. Thank you. And then I go to my hotel, I open up my computer, and I think, thank you for my computer. And then I see my wife on Skype. Now I'm talking to my wife on the other side of the planet instantaneously for free, which is mind-blowing. That used to take people 30 years.
And a couple $100,000, like in the 80s for the software.
Yeah. So, I'm thinking thank you, and then I see her face, and I think thank you. And soon I start to have like tears of gratitude going down my face. And she says to me, wow, that must have been some mantra he told you. I said, oh, yeah, it's really powerful.
Come out here and talk to him yourself. You can get it as well.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah, exactly. Now, really, it's little things like that. It only takes 5 seconds to try to feel your heart and say thank you for this person being in your life, for this child or pet being in your life. But they definitely notice it. And it's little things like that, appreciations, thank you, little ways of dealing with communication difficulties that are the difference between a relationship filled with love and one filled with conflict.
I see. And I think it's actually, so it's funny that you're pissed off about the mantra, but I think that if implemented, it actually is or can be life-changing, especially for somebody that isn't necessarily thankful for the things that they have, right?
Exactly. I think of that mantra, the several $1,000s in a week of effort, as being a bargain because it really went in deep, and I do use it every day. And, how much is inner peace, love, and gratitude worth? It's worth a lot. People sometimes spend years trying to get everything in their life just so that they can feel a moment of gratitude. But now I actually experience moments of gratitude many times a day when I see my partner. It's now a habit to internally say thank you and to feel my heart. So this stuff to me is very precious. And when you find a method that works for you, that leads to more love, to me, that's a miracle because love is the most important thing in the world.
I agree. And it, like you said, it can be a very simple thing, very small thing that can change your life.
Well, I think, and also it's different things for different people. That's why in the More Love, Less Conflict book, I have 40 methods because everybody's at a different place and one method will resonate with somebody and one won't. So you find what works for you and then you have a friend for life.
Right. And it's actually like what works for your partner. I think when you're writing a book or making a podcast or whatever it is that you're doing, when you're marketing it and thinking about you naturally think about what affects you and then apply it to your audience. In this case, your partner. You say, oh, I like this, 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 and this. So they must like it as well, or it must resonate with them. But that's not necessarily the case. So I love the phrase that you coined, charming the heart, charming your partner's heart, and finding it sort of the opposite of pushing their buttons. Could you tell me about how you came to coin that phrase? I'm interested to hear that story.
Sure. Well, many years ago, I had a girlfriend that one day I was massaging her. And as I'm massaging her, she says, would you cut that out? And I go, cut what out? She says, the massage. You're always massaging me. You're always touching me. I said, yeah, well, that's to show you that I love you. And she said, well, I don't feel very loved. You never tell me that you love me, which was true. And we talked about this, and it ends up, she would tell me that she loved me a lot, but I didn't actually like that because when I was a kid, my stepfather would take out a belt when I did something wrong, and he'd say, I'm doing this because I love you, and then he'd hit me with the belt about a dozen times. So I associated the words I love you with I'm about to beat the crap out of you. Now, and she would tell me this, and it'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, got it, Now, she associated massage with being sexually molested because her uncle used to give her massages as a kid, and then one day he molested her. So we both thought we were doing something that was loving, but we were actually pushing each other's buttons.
How did it make you feel when you found that out?
It was an incredible relief. Because here we're putting in all this effort to try to show our love, and we're doing it in a way that was actually hurting our partner. Our intention was good. Anyway, so I said, well, what I really want is to feel, I want an open heart. And she wanted that too. I said, well, what can I do that might charm, or open your heart? And she said, well, I really like the words I love you, which were pretty much meaningless to me. But I learned to say I love you because that was the way to open her heart. And she learned to give me massages because that was the way to open my heart. So I have in the More Love, Less Conflict book, the statement that you ask your partner, what are a couple things I do that help you to feel really loved by me? Because you're right that we tend to assume that what makes us feel loved is what will make our partner feel loved, and that's clearly not the case.
Yeah, I can see that being very powerful as well. Learning what love means to one another and then expressing it. It's not exactly, it's not rocket science. It's not very hard to do. It's a very simple thing, but I think it does take some vulnerability in the communicating with your partner in that way.
Yeah, and you can do the same thing for sex too. Most partners don't really know what their partner really likes in bed and what they don't like. So another method in the book is for example, tell me 3 things you really appreciate about our sexual connection and 3 things that you don't care for. And if you have a hard time doing that verbally, you can just write them down and give them to your partner. This is communication that can literally double the amount of pleasure in your sex life in 5 minutes. But most people don't have the method to get there, so they end up doing stuff which doesn't work very well.
Why do you think people don't ask these questions in relationships?
I think it's because they don't know how to be vulnerable that way. And in a way, having a book that has those questions makes it a little easier. It's like, hey, this book says this would be a good thing,
Right. Let's test it out.
Also, people aren't that deliberate. They haven't been trained in communication. And so they just don't think of it. They don't know that it can be a magical portal.
What's something that you see couples wasting a lot of time on that doesn't give them much in the way of results?
Well, the number one thing, of course, is blame. Somehow we think that if we just show our partner how wrong they are, that they will suddenly change.
Well, I think I meant more in like a methodology that maybe they learn on TV or something they read online about. They get information and it's not doing it. It's not going to make a big result.
Well, before I go into another one, I still would say that blame is the thing in that we are taught the language of blame. That's how we communicate at work, like who's at fault, who's responsible. Our court system, who's guilty, who's innocent. So we live in that context. So when it comes to relationships, we look at as who's innocent, who's guilty. And that's how we often communicate. And the problem with that is that love never comes out of that, because love is about being on the same team. And all the energy we put into who's right and who's wrong is really detrimental. And yet, look on a national scale, the whole nation is polarized now, in terms of politics, who's right, who's wrong. That doesn't usually get anywhere. It just gets people angry and self-righteous. Angry and self-righteous is not equal to love. So we have to learn a whole new paradigm for how to look at communication that actually does lead to the love that we want. And it's pretty much not ever discussed or taught in our educational system. So people really don't have a clue how to do it unless they have been trained through a book or workshop or something like that.
I totally get it. It makes so much sense in the world. The question that comes to mind is, how do people go about cultivating an awareness that they are blaming their partner, or that, if their partner blames them for something, can they bring it to attention without causing a conflict?
Yeah, well, that's where communication skill gets involved. Now, there are ways to talk that don't involve blame, such as, I think what couples really want is understanding and empathy. If you look at, say, somebody like Oprah Winfrey, I was lucky enough to be on her show a bunch of times. And I don't know if you know the background of Oprah, but This was a woman that was so poor, she never lived in a house that even had a bathroom, never had running water in her house, was put into the retarded people's class at school, and was raped at age 11, and then gang raped at age 15 that resulted in a stillborn child. That's a pretty tough background. 25 years later, she's the most powerful and most loved person who has ever lived on the planet. Now, you wonder, how did that happen? Well, I asked her, and she said that it's all about showing people that you care and showing them that you understand them. Now, not many people are good at that. So somebody who's overweight, not that smart, has every disadvantage, emotionally, sexually, physically abused, ends up being the most powerful woman on the planet because she has two skills that other people do not show. She shows her kindness every day. She shows that her understanding and empathy. Well, those skills are so valued that it took her from the bottom of the society to the top of the world because she does actually have those skills. Now, when people learn to, say, ask questions from curiosity, as you're doing, to show empathy and to really validate people's experience, that's a whole different way of communicating than showing them how they're wrong, how they're stupid, how they need to change. Because everybody wants love, and if you're somebody who can give love, you become a magnet.
Hey there, all you loyal The Process podcast listeners. I just wanted to take a moment to talk to you about a book that I created earlier this year called A Thoughtful Gift, Reflections on Our Love. And I created it because I want to do my part in helping people fully express their love for one another. It's something that gives me joy and fulfillment in my own life. And I have to admit that as I created the pages and had them illustrated, and when I held this tangible thing I had made from my brain in my hands, I had some skepticism as to whether or not it would do what I wanted it to do. Maybe skepticism is the wrong word. I had some fear, some anxiety over it. So my wife and I, we sat down together. We went through the book, and I have to say that I did a pretty damn good job. It was just an amazing night spent with her, exploring how we'd given each other strength, how we'd shown each other love, what we've helped one another overcome. And it allowed us to verbally express some things that maybe we had kept inside, maybe things that don't come up organically. And I have very, very, very happy memories making that book with her. And I just looked back through it, and it made me smile. It just did the things that I wanted it to do when I had the initial idea. So because A Thoughtful Gift is my baby, and it was built specifically to increase the intimacy of the most important relationship in your life, if you buy the book and you aren't more than satisfied, I demand that you ask for a refund. I don't want to hoodwink you by any stretch of the imagination. I think that it'll be an amazing night that gives you happy memories for many years to come. And if it's not that, if it's not everything that I'm saying it will be, here, have your money back. If you're not happy, I'm not happy. So to buy A Thoughtful Gift, you can head to athoughtfulgiftbook.com. There's also a link on mentallyinvincible.com, but primarily athoughtfulgiftbook.com. Now, back to the show. And I would say that today, love and empathy are still in great need. And I've talked about the last few podcasts. I don't know. But the social media culture, Instagram, Twitter, these things, they can be pretty shallow forms of communicating.
Yeah.
And I think about it a lot. And there's a really easy way to stand out to people. And that's just give them some depth. Answer the questions that they ask you. Give them some valuable insight. Talk to them. Have a real connection. right? I think real connections are very needed, very necessary for our lives. And I don't think we have enough of them as a society today.
Yeah, we've kind of gone for quantity rather than quality. You look at texting, social media, it's all a quantity of information. But what we're really looking for is that time when somebody's really with you, you feel like they get you, you feel like you've explored something deep, you have new insights. And that style of communication, of course, is never taught. And I think people need guidelines to get there. So, for example, in the book I wrote, I have the 12 questions of instant intimacy. And in fact, people can get them for free on my website, morelovelessconflict.com, and they're available on that website for free. These are questions that always lead to a deep conversation. And when we have these tools to get there, you can get there consistently. The problem is a lot of our tools for communication look like this. I call this a WMD, not a weapon of mass destruction, but a widget of mass distraction. And it's very hard to have a in-depth email or text conversation. So a lot of our methods of communicating now are very superficial. And yet what our heart and soul wants is deep connection. So we have to learn how to do that because it's not provided in our culture.
And dedicating yourself to helping people get these deeper connections. Why has it been something that you've pursued throughout your life and sort of dedicated your life to?
Well, it helped that I had a miserable childhood. So that helped me to get into this early because I was looking for answers early. So around age 12, I was severely depressed and realized that money wasn't going to do it because my family was actually wealthy. So I started reading self-help books and realizing every now and then 90% of it was a bunch of garbage, but 10% of it was really good. So I dedicated myself once I found something that worked. Like, for example, I found something that helped me to overcome my shyness. Then I found something that helped me to feel happier. Then I found ways to connect with people. So I went from having no friends to being the most popular person in high school in 3 years just because I had a better method. And now I've been able to reach about 250 million people around the world. This guy who was so shy I couldn't talk, now I've reached all these people, basically not because I'm such a great person, but because I have a better way of connecting with people. So some stuff really works. We use these smartphones because they work really well. They're convenient. What we need is equally convenient stuff that gets us to have more love and more peace. Because I think that's really what we want. We want love. We want peace. And we come up with all these really ineffective ways of getting there. Like money will help you feel a little bit more peaceful. But once you're middle class, more money doesn't help.
Yeah. Like we talked about in our pre-interview discussion, a professional poker player and I became friends with a billionaire. And that's how, my family, middle class, but not wealthy. And so experience with traveling and playing high stakes poker, I get to interact with some wealthy folks. And one of them was a billionaire. And what I learned from him and spending time with him and his family and seeing his daily life is that it didn't bring him more love. And love was something that he was searching for and seemed in constant search for. And I found myself getting kind of sad for this man that has all the worldly things. His company had like five jets and he could fly around and do all these things, but still he was lacking fulfillment and real connection in life. And I think that's when I learned about money, and money's not going to solve these problems. There's not enough. You can't have enough money to make somebody truly love you. It's not going to happen.
The Beatles had it right. Money can't buy me love. So, the question becomes, how does one increase the amount of love in one's life? How does one increase the amount of peace in one's life? Those were the questions that I became obsessed with.
Sure.
So I interviewed all the psychological and spiritual leaders in the world. If you've heard of them, whether it be Deepak Chopra, Mother Teresa, Dalai Lama, Wayne Dyer, everybody. I'm very persistent.
Which one were you most excited to interview?
Well, the Dalai Lama is amazing. Here's a guy who, he was tortured, his family was tortured, and he's just the happiest, joyous person. He's really fun to be around. Mother Teresa, also. I mean, these are inspiring people. But what was better than just meeting them was finding out that they each had some method for creating that magic. So my goal was to steal their method, because I'm not going to be Mother Teresa, but I might learn something from her that then really alters my life, especially when, she was somebody who was obviously very loving. Dalai Lama, obviously very peaceful. What are these people doing? And so my books have largely been a description of what the best minds on the planet are doing to create more love and more peace in their lives. Some of them didn't work for me. Some of them worked amazingly well. Like the thank you method, originally I said, well, that's a bunch of BS. Like I just wasted several $1,000s in a week. Well, in actuality, I like a 5-second method that I can do 10 times a day. That really has an impact. I also learned certain meditation methods. We were talking about before the show that I started a podcast called Awareness Explorers, where we explore different methods that I got from all these spiritual teachers. And if one actually could focus on those questions, what can I do to create more love? What can I do to create more peace? Like your life depended on it, you would find good answers. I mean, there's a lot of books. You just have to try different stuff.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you do in your life to create more love and more peace on a daily basis or regular basis? You mentioned Siri earlier.
Well, I do have Siri remind me of stuff. Obviously I do the gratitude practice, like the thank you mantra. Almost everybody who I see that has a fair amount of love or peace in their life meditate. So I do different types of meditation. And some of them are going to be very specific to you. Like I have 2 dogs that I love very much. And I actually, this is embarrassing, but just to show you how specific it is, I really love kissing them on their nose and petting them behind the ears because they make this incredible moaning sound because they really love that, and telling them how much I love them. Now, people will, pet their dog and say, oh, you're a good dog. But I noticed I really liked this experience, and they liked it too. So I will spend 5 minutes each day with each dog just doing that. To an outside observer, it looks a little weird. But I get totally into it. They get totally into it. So one of the keys is when you find yourself having a moment of love or a moment of peace, allow yourselves to stay with it. If I'm looking at a tree and I'm having a good time, I don't interrupt myself by saying I should do something else. So those are some things. I listen to music that inspires me. I do awareness practices that if people are interested in that, they can listen to the Awareness Explorers podcast. These are little things like just taking a deep breath and recognizing that I am aware, alive, and have been given this gift of life. I'll do that practice many times a day. So it's really an exploration as to what works for you. With my wife, for example, this appreciation thing. But we also do other techniques in the More Love, Less Conflict book. Like one method that we do is we'll fill out this sentence. Right now I'm feeling, you say what you're feeling, and right now I'm wanting. So I might say, right now I'm feeling kind of stressed out, and right now I'm wanting you to give me a 5-minute shoulder massage. Now we're already thinking that, But by putting it out there, there's a chance we'll actually get what we want and things move forward. So little things like that are the difference between a life that's blasé and a life that's blissful.
And anybody that's done any form of email marketing knows that you need call to actions, because people don't just magically do what you want them to do. You have to specifically ask. If you want something, specifically ask. And what I'm noticing about the things that are important to you and cultivate feelings of love and peace in your own life are things that happen and you're aware of them. And then you realize that it is something that cultivates peace and love in your own life. I think a lot of times we just have these feelings, but we don't have the awareness to say, oh yeah, I really like that. I need to do more of that, or I need to do this more regularly. And just creating, a system of recognition, I think, can go a long way towards everybody individually feeling more love and peace in their lives, regardless of, whether it's scratching the dog on the head or whatever it is that makes you really happy. I love going on walks and being around nature. That's something that gives me more love and more peace in my own life.
Yeah, definitely. Knowing what the target is helps a lot. And in Western culture, or in the Western cult that we're in, or culture, we're programmed to think that more money and more youth and more beauty is the key to happiness. But we've never necessarily checked it out. I mean, are young, wealthy, beautiful people happier than older, less wealthy people? The actual answer is no. In fact, I have a one-question IQ test for you, Brad. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. There's two groups of people. One group are people who a year earlier became paralyzed from the waist down. The other group are people who a year earlier won over $1 million in the lottery. Which group do you think is happier?
So I have inside. This is something I've read about, so I have an inside track. But I think the gut answer is the people that won $1 million.
Right. And the actual answer is they're equally happy, because it doesn't so much matter what happens in your life as to whether you're happy. What matters is how you are in the moment. So even if you're paralyzed or you win $1 million, that doesn't make much difference for very long. So by doing these little habits during each day, whether it be a walk in nature or kissing or hugging your dog or saying thank you, that's really what makes a difference. Now, unfortunately, we get so many messages otherwise in this culture. I used to be a hypnotist. So I could hypnotize you, talk to you for 5 minutes, and tell you that when you wake up, you'll think you're Mick Jagger. And you would think that you're Mick Jagger, just like right now you think you're Brad. That's the power of repeated suggestion. And we get like 400 of those suggestions a day. Now, just knowing the right target, that the target is more peace and more love, and you are like glued to that target, really makes a huge difference. I learned this lesson in college when my roommate was the only person on the varsity basketball team. And he was always challenging me to a game of basketball because he wanted to put me in my place, because I was getting straight A's without studying. And he was jealous. And I was always jealous of the fact that he had like 2 women on his arm at every moment. So he challenged me to a game of basketball. And I say, I'll do that on one condition. I get to bring any 1-ounce gadget onto the court and place it wherever I want. So he said, okay, go out to the court. And I take out my gadget, which looked a little bit like this. I put it in a strategic location, namely over his eyes. And I say, let the games begin. Now, it still ended up being pretty close. But I beat one of the best basketball players in America because I knew exactly what the target was, and he didn't. And even though I had no skill, if you throw enough things in the right general direction of love and peace, some of them will work. if you have no idea what you're aiming for, then you'll go around and you'll watch a lot of TV, and you'll spend a lot of time on Facebook and a lot of time making money, a lot of time doing stuff which does not actually lead to fulfillment, but it's what our society has brainwashed you to think will lead to fulfillment.
And by target, it's placing your attention on specific things. Our attention is very powerful. Most people don't think about it a lot, but I think in my mind, attention is the currency of the world. Where you're placing the majority of your attention, Facebook, Google, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, all these companies are billion-dollar companies because so many people give it so much of their attention. And when you strategically think about where you're going to be placing your attention, for instance, my gratitude practice in the morning that I do every day, well, by doing that, the previous day, I've already primed myself to start thinking about the next morning and what I'm going to be grateful for, noticing these things. So yeah, it's a very simple thing. The same thing happens. It's the cognitive bias of when you buy a new car and you start seeing all the same car on the road. Well, they didn't make more of those cars and you're not seeing more of them now. It's because your attention is on that car. And so that's what you're picking out. So if you think about really most areas of your life that you need help and need personal growth, that's a great place to start, is creating those targets.
Yeah. And when you see that certain things get in the way, that there's obstacles, for example, this idea that blame is in the way of love. So if blame's in the way of love and your partner's doing something, you have a conflict, how do you not blame them? How do you do that? Well, most people don't know. So say, like in the More Love, Less Conflict book, I have the statement, one way that I see that I'm partly responsible for this upset is. So let's say my wife and I are having a problem with something. The house is a mess. And she's all stressed out about it. If I say, one way I see that I'm partly responsible for this upset is I left some dishes in the sink last night. That opens it up for her to then say how she's responsible. So rather than blaming each other and nobody listening, now we're sharing how we contributed, and it's really easy to get back to a place of love. So little things, little techniques I find were really major for me for learning how to overcome the common obstacles to love and peace. Because there are lots of obstacles to love and peace in this world. One of them might be your communication style. One of them might be the culture. But there are little runarounds that can really make a huge difference. And most people have not studied these in a way that is actually practical in their life. That's why I think the best methods literally take 10 seconds or less. Because the average attention span in America now is 8 seconds, according to Microsoft research. The average person now can focus their attention for 8 seconds. Now, goldfish have an attention span of 9 seconds. So this is not something to be proud of. And with all the input we get, the attention span is going down gradually. 20 years ago, it was twice as much. So we need things that are really simple. That's why these are so powerful, is that, you get a little text, you go to Twitter, you get something, it gives you a dopamine high for a second, but then you crash because it's not really fulfilling. It's like fast food.
Yes, and something that I have wondered about that I could probably talk for a while is these little dopamine releases from all these different things that didn't exist necessarily 20 years ago, and how that affects happiness and our ability to create dopamine in the brain over time. I don't think it's going to be a good thing. What we're going to learn in the next 20 years when it relates to dopamine and all of these specific triggers that we face on a daily basis. And speaking of the goldfish, I've heard the goldfish study, the 8 seconds of attention. And I want to say that I think we are individually, we're more capable of paying attention to things longer than 8 seconds. For instance, a funny cat video. We can watch it for, minutes, 30 minutes, who knows, a long time. If it grabs our attention, if it, we connect with it in some way. But it's about facilitating connection and being connected, and putting yourself in those positions rather than, the tail wagging the dog and having tons of notifications and on your phone. I find myself driving down the road and I'll be listening to a song. I'll have the music way up. I'll be jamming out, and my radio will suggest, it'll have like a favorite artist alert for a new song. And whenever that pops up, I get a dilemma. Am I going to like that song more than I'm going to like the song that I'm listening to? And I'll find myself jamming out and changing the song instead of just enjoying the song that I'm listening to, and then I had this internal struggle when I'm listening to the new song. Do I really like this song better than the other one? Oh, this isn't making me feel very good. And then a new favorite artist alert comes up and I'm like, oh, I'm going to change it to this one. And all of a sudden I'm consuming like 7 minutes of these songs that admittedly I like, rather than, just relaxing and without the notification on the Jeep, without me seeing it, I would just enjoy it,
Yeah. Well, in this cult that we live in, we're always taught that something more or different is going to do it for us. So we have that programming rather than go deeper into what is, or loving what is more deeply. And that's a problem that we all are subjected to in this day and age.
Yeah, and I try to take one day a week to completely unplug and not get any of these inputs. And I always feel more energized, more refreshed. I have more mental clarity than, like last Sunday, this week, I had to read 2 books, or I wanted to read two books for people that I was interviewing for my podcast. I read both of them on Sunday, just completely unplugging, and it felt great. You don't realize how freeing it can be to just release yourself from all the distractions and all the pulls on your attention that we encounter every single day. What's a project that you're working on that's near and dear to your heart? And
well, I mentioned that I'm doing this podcast, Awareness Explorers, because everybody has peace and love inside themselves, the kingdom of heaven's within. But most people don't have the key to get there, to unlock it. So in this podcast, I present those keys, and people can download those episodes at awarenessexplorers.com or on iTunes. So I'm trying to make finding that peace as easy as turning the channels on TV. Because people spend a lot of time doing this, and that gets them a lot of entertainment. But if you could get to peace and bliss as easily as doing that, then the world will change. So I try to teach people how to do that on my podcast and in my life.
Awesome. I see the theme is very complex, difficult problems, creating simple, easy solutions.
Absolutely.
So have you ever strongly believed something in your life only to reverse course later on? And if so, what led to that change?
Yeah, I used to think that small things don't make any difference, just get, but now I think that being with small things does make a difference, both in the quality of one's life and in the outcome.
What is a small thing?
Small thing might be being careful with my words, or being on time for an appointment, because that makes a difference, or showing my love to my wife every day. And, little things like that, I think, are the key, where I used to think, well, it doesn't matter as long as you're healthy or whatever, So what made that difference is I started to see in my interviews with these well-known people that they focus on small things, that they don't let the little things go. They actually are very aware of subtleties that I was not seeing. And that when I was aware of those things, life went better and was richer and deeper.
Awesome. I get it. We displace a lot of the tiny actions that make a big difference because we're focused on, what we think are bigger concerns in the moment. So taking the time to spend, like you said, daily time. How do I please my wife? What can I do to cultivate more love in my life? And I can guarantee that if I'm cultivating more love with my wife in my life, I'm going to be happier. The days are going to be smoother. She's going to be happier, and life will ultimately be better.
Yeah.
So if you could share one truth with the world, what would that truth be?
Decide on what feelings you most want in the world and who might be a good mentor or expert that is already having that feeling so you can learn from them. That can shave decades off of your learning curve. So, I wanted peace, so I talked to Mother Teresa, Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, and the Dalai Lama. And they had really good methods, and now I have peace, whereas I used to not have any peace. So it really made a difference.
Awesome. I love it. So finally, where can my audience find you on the World Wide Webs?
Well, I have two websites. One is morelovelessconflict.com that has those 12 questions of instant intimacy that they can download for free. And then I have another website called findinghappiness.com that has stuff about everything else, a lot of free downloads, a lot of free information, and people can contact me through there.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to put that in the show notes. Speaking of the non-inner peaceful Jonathan, if the old you could see the new you today, what do you think he would say?
If the old me, the non-peaceful one, could see me, he wouldn't believe it. He'd go, how'd that happen? Because, I was suicidally depressed as a teenager. So I think they would be, like, how'd that happen, And, but really it comes down to learning from experts and being persistent. Being on the right road, going slowly is much better than being on the wrong road, going quickly.
Yeah, I think one of my guests, I can't remember which specific one, but they brought up a quote that was, wouldn't it be really sad if we reach the top of our ladder, spend our life reaching the top of the ladder, only to realize once we get there that we're on the wrong ladder?
Yeah.
Thank you, my friend. It was an honor, a pleasure. I'm super grateful for your time and energy and this conversation.
My pleasure, Brad. Keep up the good work. It's good to get this information out.
All right, my friend. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Next time on the Process Podcast, we have venture capitalist and boataffair.com founder, Adrian Walter.
So I'll tell my 20-year-old self, listen a bit less and try to distinguish a bit more who to actually listen to and who not to listen to. Pursue your passion. If you encounter naysayers, try to realize that a bit faster and grow that thick skin a bit faster, because it's totally normal. Adrian, you're 20 years old. It's totally normal that somebody will take apart your idea. Feel down about it by all means, but no more than 5 or 10 minutes.